Fast forward. There. To the 1630s, when archaeologist Ralph Selecki, who has the exact same pose that Stuyvesant had in the previous slide, tried to along with Carlos Smith and Matthew Schreiner, tried to save what remained of the embankments of Fort Massapequa, Long Island. I should point out that we are honored to have Professor Selecki with us today, and if you have any questions or make any errors, perhaps he'll help out later. He's wearing a coat and tie today, and not just his underwear, so you may not recognize the area around the site is about to be destroyed by a large suburban development. Parts of the site had also been plundered by looters, some using shovels, others using potato hooks to get through the midden or piles of shell as they looked for treasure. Selecki and his colleagues, as well as local citizens, tried to rescue what they could. There was no institutional support for archaeology at that time, no laws or even much interest to protect such an important heritage. And this really is a fabulous site, and I hope I can do some justice to it. So they tested the site on their own time with their own money, neither in great supply, and what they found could very well be the remains of this promised, but so far legendary, trading fort. In the 1990s, Professor Selecki went back to consider the site he and his friends had dug 50 years before, and he did an incredible research job on this truly incredible site. So what is it? It's a mid-17th century quadrangular earthwork 100 feet square that once had a palisade made from red pine with posts shaped with metal axes and 2 European-style bastions. It's too small to be a fortified living place, and besides, there is no household trash within it. Reportedly, there is also an Indian village close by, as well as a cemetery, maybe contemporary with the fort, but alas, they were destroyed by development, and little is known about them. It was only through the persistent efforts of local preservation and Ralph Selecki that the site of the fort itself was saved. At the fort proper, Selecki found areas where wampum was made, just outside what might be the entrance to the fort. The midden is largely made up of debris from making it. These shell beads, made from local shellfish, were used for ritual trade, tribute, and even as gifts to Stuyvesant. By now, the beaver was hunted out of this area, and making shell beads and selling land was the only entree that the people here had into the new economy. Although the fort functioned as a mint, it was also a trading post, where traders exchanged European goods for wampum. Selecki identified mid-century trade items, including mouth harps, clay pipes, and other trade goods. Mouth harps were wildly popular. In fact, when Jasper Dankers went to Brooklyn in 1679, he was surprised by how well the Indians played these mouth harps. Many were of iron, but by mid-century, some like this one, made of grass and stamped with an R, started appearing at some Indian sites as well as Dutch sites, both in New Netherland and in Old Netherland, in the Republic. Everybody liked them. Dutch archaeologists think that these particular brass harps all came from a single craftsman in Amsterdam, and they were made between 1640 and 1680. There are also some native artifacts found, such as pottery, arrowheads, and this wooden mortar. But back to the fort. Selecki also discovered clinch nails, perhaps left over from a door at the fort's entrance that had collapsed after the fort was abandoned. Clinching increases the holding power of a nail enormously, and it was used at that time in European nautical construction. It was not a native practice. It also implies that an iron hammer was used. Selecki makes an excellent argument that the Dutch had to be involved, one way or another, in the fort's construction. We don't know if the actual labor was performed by the Dutch, Africans, the Indians, or some combination of all three. If it's not the promised trading post, it's certainly a similar unrecorded one, and I think the odds are that this is in fact the one. Let me add, the fort's location was ideal for a trading post. It faced a salt meadow, it had strategic access to the Great South Bay, and from there up the Long Island coast and the New York Harbor. That salt meadow that was once there is the ball field that you see today right behind. That's developed before you, right behind the fort. While it functioned, the fort was important in coastal New York. It was here that Indians nurtured social and political relationships and exchanged small talk and information with their Dutch allies. These relationships, I argue, were important for both peoples and for understanding of the complexity of those times. The fort also, I think, served as a visual, prominent symbol to everyone, Dutch, English, African, Indian alike, of the alliance between Stuyvesant and Takapusa. One that went beyond trade, and then one that both would call upon in the difficult years again. What that relationship entailed, we will discuss in a few minutes. But first, let's go up the Hudson to Fort Orange, where the Mohawk are also asking for help for their castles or fortified villages. Then we'll come back down here and see what happened. This is an early view of Fort Hudson, but I love the painting, so I'm going to use it anyway. In 1657, Sassy-Dago, who was, if you remember, at the peace treaty that ended Keith's War, went along with other Mohawk sachems to Fort Orange to request building help. It's not clear from documents what the result was. But then came a further series of extraordinary meetings, starting on September 6, 1659, in which he probably also took part. That day, Mohawk sachems, whose names were not recorded, came to Fort Orange to renew their friendship, offer gifts, and express their concerns and anxieties. And they ended by arguing that the Dutch, as good allies, should help them with their demands and complaints. They pointed out that the French helped their Indians, and then added, and this is the demand we're interested in right now, do the same for us, and help us repair our castles. They went on to ask that the Dutch send 30 men and horses and wood sleds to cut and draw wood for their castles to repair them. Then they left. 2 days later, the magistrates met to consider these proposals. They decided to reassure the Mohawk of their brotherly union and say that since Stuyvesant was expected at Fort Orange, they would wait to see what he had to say. With their message, they sent a very handsome gift of wampum, worth the equivalent of 50 days of a commoner's labor. That's a big gift. 8 days later, they met again. Stuyvesant was sick, he wasn't coming. So they decided to send representatives to Kanawagwa, the eastern castle, and enter into a further covenant with the Dutch, with the Mohawk, answer their propositions, and offer them gifts of wampum, 70 pounds of gunpowder, 100 pounds of lead, 15 axes, and 2 beavers' worth of knives. Even Johannes Lamontagne, the vice director, describes these as considerable presents. These are very handsome presents. And so, on the 24th of September in 1659, an historic meeting was held at Kanawagwa with sachems from all 3 Mohawk castles and 17 Dutch dignitaries, including Jeremiah van Rensselaer, Aaron van Curler, and Volker Jansen Dow. This was an extraordinary event for both the Mohawk and the Dutch. Going into Mohawk country is not what a Dutch court usually did. The meeting was important to them, I argue. The account written by the Dutch after the meeting reports that the Dutch used the language of kinship, called the Mohawk brothers, affirmed relations, friendship, and offered strings of wampum after each of their responses to the earlier Mohawk request. All this was very appropriate to the Iroquois sense of occasion. The Dutch also made clear that they were speaking in the name of Stuyvesant and all the other Dutch chiefs and their children. The spokesman, probably Van Curler, who had a long and trusted relationship with the Mohawks, said, and I quote, "Brothers, we have come only to renew our old friendship and brotherhood, and you must tell it to your children. Our children will always be able to know and remember it through the writings we leave behind. We die, but they remain forever." End of quote.